Hey everyone, it's James, FitRV, and today we're going to make a video about the Winnebago roof rack option. It's available on some Winnebago models. And if you're thinking about buying one of these models, you might be thinking, should I get the roof rack? So we thought we'd make this little video to help you decide. So we're going to do two things. First, we're going to go through kind of the roof rack as it comes from Winnebago, the ins and outs of that. And then I'm going to take you on a little tour around our own Echo's roof and show you some of what I've been able to do with the roof rack. And spoiler alert, we get the roof rack every time, so no surprises there. Anyway, let's get going. So let's talk about the factory roof rack option. Right now you can get it on three different models. That's the Travato, the Echo, and the Revel. And not coincidentally, if you're like us, those are probably the three models you might be interested in. Now, we have had a Travato, we've borrowed a Travato, and now we have obviously an Echo. And we had the factory roof rack option on all of them, wouldn't change it. Now the rack on the Revel is going to look a little bit different, but it's got the same basic construction. They've just added some decorative / functional panels on the sides. Decorative because they kind of look cool, and functional because they've got slots in them to to allow you to lash things to it. And one other thing, I guess it goes without saying that if you get a Winnebago with a pop top option, you can't get a roof rack. It kind of prohibits that. Okay, so let's talk about the construction of the roof rack for a bit. It's a combination of aluminum extrusions like we have here for the side rail and under here for the cross rail, aluminum extrusions, and then brackets and towers and that sort of thing. Now, on our Echo, we've also got some stiffeners in the middle of the roof rails to kind of help counteract any sagging you might get in the middle of the coach because it's kind of wide. Now, you're going to want to check your owner's manual for your model and year of Winnebago to make sure you're not overloading the roof rack. You don't want to do that. So like our Echo, for example, in the owner's manual, we have a listed capacity of 200 pounds for the roof rack or 40 pounds for any one particular roof rail. So do pay attention to those. You don't want to overload the roof rack. The other main thing, obviously, is you're going to want to not load the roof rack in any way it's not designed for. So like, don't go hanging ladders off the side of the roof rack if it's not designed for that. If it's designed for it, that's one thing. And then finally, probably the biggest thing about the roof rack is that if you have the factory roof rack option and your RV has solar panels, those will be mounted to the roof rack instead of directly to the roof. That's kind of a big deal. Well, except for flexible panels. Those they'll mount directly to the roof. But rigid solar panels will be mounted to the roof rack and not to the roof itself. Kind of a big deal. Okay, now here's where we pivot and start talking about things you can do with the rack. It turns out that solar panels on the rack thing is a huge deal for me because it means that if we want to move, change, or alter the configuration of your solar panels in any way, it's really easy to do if they're mounted to the roof rack. And you can see here, I've taken the default Echo 450 something watts of solar and I have replaced it with 700 watts of solar, but I did it in a way that also gives me a path so that I can walk back to front. So that was a pretty big win for me with the roof rack. Now, there's also, since we're talking about solar panels, there's this other thought that solar panels, and this is a known thing, but solar panels are generally more efficient if they are cooler. And so by mounting your solar panels on a roof rack, you're guaranteed a good 3.5 inches of space underneath the panels. Should keep them a little cooler. I'm not aware of anyone who has actually done any experiments with, one mounted directly to the roof and one mounted on a rack. But if you ask, Professor Google, you'll get estimates of anywhere between, 4 to 25% more efficient if you can keep the panels a bit cooler. So solar panels on the rack, kind of a big win. But that's not the only reason we always opt for the roof rack. So I'm going to show you some other stuff that you can do with it. Like this here, this fairing. This is something I made and attached to the roof rack, and there's probably a video out there somewhere of me do.
There's no video of it. I wanted you to make a video of the fairing, but you didn't want to. There's only pictures.
Okay. Anyway, I made this and mounted it up myself. It's pretty easy to do because the Winnebago roof rack is really easy to modify. All you need to mount things to it are 5/16 inch carriage bolts, and you just slide these down the track of the roof rack, or the rails in this case, and then you just need to make sure there's a 5/16 inch hole on whatever goes on to that, and then you just secure it down with a nut or a lock nut or a nut and lock washer. These are easy to find. They're available at just any decent hardware store. You'll be able to find 5/16 inch carriage bolts. Now, the fairing I made pretty much just goes right like you would think. So I made some brackets. There are 6 brackets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of 1/8 inch aluminum. I just bent them and drilled them. And then this fairing piece is just acrylic. And I cut it out, mounted it up with really just hardware store stuff. Now I made this myself. I think since I've done this, other folks have come out with actual products that you can make, so you wouldn't have to jimmy it up yourself, but that's what I did. It's been up here coming up on 3 years now. Still looks pretty good. So now let's talk about antennas. And if you're the kind of RVer that needs connectivity on the road, like cell signals, that kind of thing, you're gonna want to seriously consider a roof rack. Here's why. Right here you see I have mounted a PepWave. This is a 4-element MIMO antenna, right? And that's mounted, and it's just mounted directly to the roof rack using the factory supplied, whatever they gave me to mount it. Worked out great. But here's the thing. This isn't the only thing that's been mounted here for cell coverage. I originally started off with a cell booster mounted here. And again, mounted directly to the roof rack, etc., you know, with the supplied hardware. Here's the thing. This kind of technology changes frequently. And so, you know, the cell booster was no longer working for you. Something like this is now. You've got to swap it out. Easy to do on the roof rack. Had I mounted that cell booster antenna to the roof, I'd remove it. And then I'd have one set of holes from where I'd removed it that I would have to patch. And then I'd be drilling a new set of holes into the roof for this guy that I would then have to seal up. With the roof rack, I don't have to do any of that. I just mount it all to the rack, and there you go. So antennas, connectivity on the road, big bonus to have the roof rack. Not that you can't do it without it, but the technology changes, and if you want to be able to easily swap, it's kind of important to have an easy way to do that. Okay, and the Starlink antenna. And this one I know I made a video on, so in fact, I think I made 2. So you can go watch those videos if you want some more details on this particular mount. But I'm calling it out separately because this is a little bit more involved of a roof mount. So, because in this case, I'm spanning 2 different roof rails. So basically, I took some aluminum U-channel, inverted it, drilled 5/16 inch holes into the channel, mounted it across the 2 sets of roof rails, and then mounted up the Starlink dish underneath with, I think, quarter inch bolts underneath. It's been holding up great, no complaints there. And again, prevented me from having to drill any holes in the roof. If I had to replace or remove my Starlink antenna, I would have no residual damage to the roof because of that. But it's not just antennas, solar panels, fairings. There's other stuff you can do with the roof rack too. I've seen people mount cargo boxes to their roof rack. Not so much with the Echo because we've got quite a bit of cargo space, but like on something like the Revel, a cargo box or a gear box up on the roof makes a lot of sense. In our Travato, it even came with attachments so we could attach a rigid kayak up onto the roof. Nowadays we travel with inflatables, but still, that was kind of cool. And then some models of the roof rack on the Travato I know came with a ladder that it was designed for it. But it came with a ladder that you could move and position along the rails, along the sides, so that you could have a ladder that was able to get to more than one spot on the roof. And a Travato's got a metal roof, you don't want to dent it, so that was kind of cool. Okay, so as you've probably guessed by now, we are all in on the roof racks. As much as I like to mod and tinker, and as much as that involves the roof, it just makes a whole lot of sense for us. But maybe you're not. Maybe you're on the fence. Maybe you've heard some negatives about roof racks. So let's just address some of those now. And the first is drag. And I'm a former aerospace engineer, so I can tell you, yes, you will incur some additional drag having a roof rack versus just a naked roof. But it's not likely to be all that great of a penalty. So here's why. RV roofs are kind of a sea of obstructions anyway. You'll have air conditioners, you'll have vent caps, you'll have solar panels, you'll have fan covers, yada, 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 all up on your roof, creating a whole lot of turbulent flow anyway. So will you notice the additional drag from a roof rack? It's not likely in any way that you're going to know. But I can't tell you that for sure with your RV because I don't have a low-speed wind tunnel. But if you have a low-speed wind tunnel that could fit our RV in it, by all means, give me a call. We'll figure something out. But anyway, so you might incur a little bit of additional drag. Now, I'm going to guess that if you're contemplating this for your outdoor recreation, I mean, sure, we would all like the best fuel economy possible, but If this is something you're thinking of, then maybe fuel economy isn't like in the top 5 of your list for outdoor recreation stuff. So yes, there may be some drag, not likely to be anything you'll notice. Number 2, noise. And yes, you can get some additional noise from roof racks, but it's not likely to bother you. Here's why. So our fairing up on the top there, that we talked about before, Winnebago does not supply a crossbar on the roof in that very forward position. I had to actually get that bar so that I could attach the fairing to it. And bringing it home, as soon as I attached the bar without a fairing on it and started driving around, I immediately realized why Winnebago does not offer a crossbar in that forward position. It was loud. It made a lot of noise. So if something like that happens in an RV, Winnebago is going to do something to address it before the RV gets out there and everybody complains about it. So it's not likely to be a problem in the first place. In the second place, if you put something on the roof rack and it does generate some noise, usually the solution is pretty simple. It's just to move it a few inches one way or another. Now, compare that with, like, let's say I had mounted a Starlink antenna on the roof, and I realized after I got it mounted and sealed up that it creates an awful lot of howling wind noise. Well, then you're kind of up a creek at that point, because you've got to remove it from that position, patch up those holes from where you had the Starlink mounted, guess again, put the antenna someplace else, and then seal that up. It's kind of a bigger ordeal than it is if you just have a roof rack. So there may be some additional noise. It's not likely to be very objectionable. And if it is, you can just move something just a few inches. In fact, part of the reason we put the fairing up there, in fact, the main reason, was to help mitigate noise coming from our roof vent, which is behind the fairing. So there may be some noise, but it's not anything you're going to notice probably. And then the third thing is weight. And obviously a roof rack has more weight than no roof rack. But remember, you can mount 200 pounds of stuff on the roof rack. The weight of the rack is probably not as significant as the weight of what you're going to put on it, I'm guessing. And in that respect, it's not like any other mod. You know, you have to weigh the benefits of the mod or whatever it is you're going to bring versus the amount that it weighs, and that's other stuff you can't bring. For us, the roof rack is an easy win in that regard. So there you have it, Winnebago roof racks. We have had them on every Winnebago RV we have ever had, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So if you're shopping for a Winnebago and you're wondering if you want the roof rack, hopefully this has been helpful to you. Now, there will be a post over on thefitRV.com that I'll link to down in the YouTube description where you can leave comments, ask questions, etc. So if you have questions, pop on over and I'll try to help answer them for you. Anyway, this is James. See you later. Bye.